All right, this is the second notebook. Ooh, I'm gonna sweat on how to pronounce these characters. Dainishiki. Dainishiki. Um, which Hugada Baba. I don't know what it means. Let me search it up. If I can type it. Um, hmm. It just means the second note. It just means the second note. Okay. Very beautiful writing that. Anyhow, on the shore, at a point so close to the ocean, one might imagine it was. Ah, ah. Sorry. I need to drink more water. On the shore, at a point so close to the ocean, one might imagine it was there that the waves broke, stood a row of over 20 fairly tall cherry trees with coal black trunks. Every April when the new year when this when every April when the new school year was about to begin, these trees would display their dazzling blossoms and their moist brown leaves against the blue of the sea. Soon a snowstorm of blossoms would scatter innumerable petals into the water, flecking the surface with points of white which the waves carried back to the shore. This beach strewn with cherry blossoms served as the playground of the high school I attended. Stylized cherry blossoms flowered even on the badge of the regulation school cap and on the buttons of our uniforms. A distant relative of mine had a house nearby, which was one reason why my father had especially selected for me this school of cherry blossoms by the sea. I was left in the care of the family, whose house was so close to the school that even after the morning bell had rung, I could still make it to my class in time if I ran. This was the kind of lazy student I was. Oh, real, so real. But I nevertheless managed, thanks to my accustomed antics, to win popularity with my schoolmates. This was my first experience living in a strange town. I found it far more agreeable than my native place. One might attribute this perhaps to the fact that my clowning by this time became so much a part of me that it was no longer such a strain to trick others. Ah, man. Man, oh man, boy, oh boy. Um, I wonder, though, if it was not due instead to the incontestable difference in the problem involved in performing before one's own family and strangers, or in one's own town and elsewhere. This problem exists no matter how great a genius one may be. An actor dreads most the audience in his hometown. I imagine the greatest actor in the world would be paralyzed in a room where all of his family and relatives were gathered to watch him. But I had learned to play my part. I had, moreover, been quite a success. It was inconceivable that so talented an actor would fail away from home. The fear of human beings continued to writhe in my breast. I'm not sure whether more or less intensely than before, but my acting talents had unquestionably matured. I could always convulse the classroom with laughter, and even as the teacher protested what a good class it would be if only I were not in it, he would be laughing behind his hand. At a word from me, even the military drill instructor, whose more usual idiom was a barbarous. I almost said Barbados, so I was spooked. Um, a barbarous thunderstorm roar would burst into helpless laughter. Barbados, the the little place. Um, just when I had begun to relax my guard a bit, fairly confident that I had succeeded by now in concealing completely my true identity, I was stabbed in the back quite unexpectedly. The assailant like most people would stab in the back, bordering on being a simpleton. The punniest boy in class. Oh, he's so punny. The punniest boy in class whose scrofulous water, please. Whose scrofulous face and floppy jacket with sleeves too long for him was complemented by a total lack of proficiency in his studies and by such clumsiness in military drill and physical training that he was perpetually designated as an onlooker. Onlooker and, you know, um, little quotation marks. Not surprisingly, I failed to recognize the need to be on my guard against him. That day, Takashi, the boy's name as I recall, was on his usual onlooking, in little quotation marks, during the physical training period while the rest of us drilled on the horizontal bar. Deliberately assuming as solemn a face as I could muster, I lunged overhead at the bar, shouting with the effort. I missed the bar and sailed on as if I were making a broad jump, landing with a thud in the sand on the seat of my pants. This failure was entirely predetermined, but sorry, it was entirely premeditated, but everybody burst out laughing, exactly as I planned. I got to my feet with a ruthful smile and was brushing the sand from my pants when Takashi, who had crept up from somewhere behind, poked me in the back. He murmured, "You did it on purpose." I trembled all over. I might have guessed that somebody would detect that I deliberately missed the bar, but that Takashi should have been the one who came as a bolt from the blue. I felt as if I had seen the world before me burst in an instant into a raging flames. This is where you're supposed to gaslight him, buddy, and you're supposed to say, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Who are you?" Dude, I wish I did that on purpose. Um, I don't know, man. Okay. Um, I felt as if I had seen the world before me burst in an instant into the raging flames of hell. It was all I could do to suppress a wild shriek of terror. The ensuing days were imprinted with my anxiety and dread. I continued on the surface, making everybody laugh with my miserable clowning, but now and then painful sighs escaped my lips. Whenever I did, Takashi would see through it, and I was sure he would soon start spreading the word to everybody he saw. At this thought, my forehead broke out in a sweat. I stared around me vacantly with the wild eyes of a madman. If it was possible, I felt I would like to keep a 24-hour a day surveillance over Takashi, never stirring from him morning, noon, or night, to make sure that he did not divulge the secret. I brooded over what I should do. I would devote the hours spent with him to persuading him that my antics were not on purpose, that's in quotes, but the genuine article. If things went well, I would like to become his inseparable friend. But if this proved utterly impossible, I would have no choice but to pray for his death. Typically enough, the one thing that never occurred to me was to kill him. During the course of my life, I had wished innumerable times that I might meet with a violent death, but I'd never once desired to kill anybody. I thought that in killing a dreaded adversary. Wait, what am I even reading? I thought that in killing a dreaded uh adversary, I might actually be bringing him happiness. Bro. In order to win over Takashi, I closed my face. Closed. I blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Oh my god, I was reading his name wrong this entire time. I was just imagining his name was Takashi, but it's Takaichi. I was reading his name wrong. Can I? I'm just gonna change his name to Takashi because I already gave him that name, right? Can I do that? I mean, it's a real name. Man, it's Takaichi. Takeichi. Man. Oh well. In order to win over Taki. Takaichi. In order to win over Takaichi, I clothed my face in the gentle, beguiling smile of the false Christian. I strolled everywhere with him, my arm lightly around his scrawny shoulders, my head tilted affectionately towards him. I frequently would invite him in honey eyed, cajoling tones to come and play in the house where I was lodging, but instead of an answer, he'd always give me only blank stares in return. One day, after school was let out, it must have been in the early summer, there was a sudden downpour. The other students were making a great fuss about getting back to their lodgings, but since I lived just around the corner, I decided to make a dash for it. Just as I was about to rush inside, I noticed Takaichi hovering dejectedly in the entranceway. I said, "Let's go, I'll lend you my umbrella." I grabbed Takaichi's hand as he hesitated and ran out with him into the rain. When we arrived home, I asked my aunt to dry her jackets. I had succeeded in luring Takaichi into my home. I should. Mm, oh, I wanted to say something, but never mind. The household consisted of my aunts, a woman in her 50s, and my two cousins, the older of whom was a tall, frail, bespectacled girl of about 30. She had been married at the time, but she'd been married at one time, but was later separated. And the younger, a short, round faced girl who looked fresh out of high school. The ground floor of the house was given over to a shop where small quantities of stationery supplies and sporting goods were offered for sale, but the principal source of income was the rents from the 5 or 6 tenants built by my late uncle. Takaichi, standing haplessly in the room, said, "My ears hurt." They must have gotten wet in the rain. I examined his ears and discovered that they were both running horribly. The lobes seemed filled to the bursting with pus. Ugh. I simulated an exaggerated concern. "This looks terrible. It must hurt." Then, in the gentle tones a woman might use, I apologized. "I'm so sorry I dragged you out in this rain." I went downstairs to fetch some cotton wool and alcohol. That's actually so real. If you don't have like eardrops, use alcohol. It doesn't solve your earache or issues. I mean, that's for the pus. He's using it for the pus. But generally, even if you have like swimmer's ear and your little drums are gonna explode or something, alcohol is a great way to dampen it until you can get actual eardrops. I've done that before. I remember when I was in LA, oh my god, I was kayaking with Crystal, right? I forget where it was. I could search up the address. I have some photos. I'll do that now. Why am I saying it like I can't? I don't have the time for it. I do. I do. So, I'll just search up Crystal with my phone, right? It creates little categories for people. And I click on her little face. Boop. When I click on her face, I can go into our kayaking photo. Right. Must be somewhere here. Where is it? Yep, there it is. We were in Almedo Bay Marina. That's where we were. Anyhow, it was either when I was there or I don't think I got wet, so it wasn't that. But when I took a shower, um, the water clogged my ears really bad. I got like swimmer's ear from the taking a shower after we went to the marina. We're doing some nice figure eights and stuff around people's houses, and it was awful. I remember walking out at nighttime. It was kind of sketchy. The place, we had an Airbnb, but I still walked out. Going to different whatever gas stations and convenience stores were nearby to see if I could get some eardrops. I couldn't find any, so I ended up getting some alcohol and a little bit of like swab or something to hold it to my ear until we eventually got to a place where I could get real eardrops. But that was a thing, man. I That really hurt. I didn't like it. But hey, we had a good time. I have some lovely photos of that time. Yeah, those are so cute, man. Oh, I love my friends. Okay. Who's in this photo? I see. Okay, Aiden had blue hair at that time? I completely forgot. It's Aiden, Crystal, me. I see Chen, and can't tell who that is in the back. I forget. Anyhow, we love. We'll get back to reading then. I went downstairs to fetch some cotton wool and alcohol. Takaichi lay on the floor with his head on my lap. Oh, the things I want to say right now. And I painstakingly swabbed his ears. Even Takaichi seemed not to be aware of the hypocrisy, the scheming behind my accent. Oh, behind my actions. That's so real. It feels like you're always scheming everything. There's nothing that's real. Everything's deliberate. It feels robotic and fake. Okay. The hypocrisy, the scheming behind my actions. Far from it. His compliment as he lay there with his head pillowed in my lap was, "I bet lots of women will fall for you." It was his illiterate approximation of a compliment. This, I was to learn in later years, was a kind of demonical a prophecy, more horrible than Takaichi could have realized. To fall for, to be fallen for. I feel in these words something unspeakable, vulgar, farcical. Actually, bro, instead of pretending I know how to pronounce these words because I've never heard them read out loud, I'm gonna search it up. Farcical. Because I know what the word is, but like, bro is ridiculous, but farcical. Okay. Oh, like it's a farce. Like you're okay. Like it's from farce. So silly. So silly. Oh my god. That I couldn't. Bro is idiotic. Okay. Da. I feel in these words something unspeakably vulgar, farcical. What did I even say before? I don't even remember. But it's farcical, I believe. But that's what I said originally. I think I don't know. I don't remember. I don't care. We're gonna continue. And at the same time, extraordinarily. And at the same time, extraordinarily complacent. Once these expectations put in an appearance, no matter how solemn the place, the silence cathedrals of melancholy crumble, leaving nothing but an impression of fatuousness. It is curious, but the cathedrals of melancholy are not necessarily demolished if one can replace the vulgar, "What a messy business it is to be fallen for," by the more literary, "What uneasiness lies in being loved." What uneasiness lies in being loved. Takaichi uttered that idiotic compliment that woman would fall for me because I had been kind enough to clean the discharge from his ears. My reaction at the time was merely to blush and smile, without saying a word in return, but to tell the truth, I had already had a faint inkling of what his prophecy implied. No, to speak in those terms, of the atmosphere engendered by so vulgar an expression as to fall for is to betray a precocity of sentiment not even worthy of the dialogue of the romantic lead in a musical comedy. I certainly was not moved by the farcical, self satisfied emotion suggested by the phrase to have a faintest inkling. I have always found the females of the human species many times more difficult to understand than the male. In my immediate family, women outnumbered the men, and many of my cousins were girls. There were also the maid servants of the crime. I think it would be no exaggeration to say that my only playmates while I was growing up were girls. Nevertheless, it was with much of the sensations of treading on thin ice I associated with these girls. I could almost never guess their motives. I was in the dark. At times, I made indiscreet mistakes which brought me painful wounds. These wounds, unlike the scars from the lashing a man might give, cut inwards very deep, like an internal hemorrhage. Ah. Okay, an internal hemorrhage bringing intense discomfort. Once inflicted, it was extremely hard to recover from one such wound. Women led me on only to throw me aside. Women led me on only to throw me aside. They mocked and tortured me when others were around, only to embrace me with passion as soon as everyone had left. Women sleep so soundly they seem to be dead. Who knows? Women may live in order to sleep. Oh my god, please. I want to live in order to sleep. These and various other generalizations were products of an observation of women since boyhood days. But my conclusion was that though women appear to belong to the same species as man, they are actually quite different creatures, and these incomprehensible, insidious beings have, fantastic as it seems, always looked after me. In my case, such an expression as to be fallen for, or even to be loved, is not in the least appropriate. Perhaps it describes the situation more accurately to say that I was looked after. Women were also less demanding than men when it came to my clowning. When I played the jester man did not go laughing indefinitely. Oh sorry, when I played the jester man did what? Oh, sorry. When I played the jester, men did not. There's like no. Okay, whatever. When I played the jester, men did not go laughing indefinitely. I knew that if I got carried away by my success in entertaining a man and overdid the role, my comedy would fall flat. And I was always careful to quit at a suitable place. Women, on the other hand, have no sense of moderation. No matter how long I went on with my antics, they would always ask for more, and I would become exhausted responding to their insatiable demands for encores. They really laugh an amazing amount of the time, and I suppose one can say that women stuff themselves with far more pleasures than men. Stuff yourself with pleasure, huh? Okay, I'll continue. Um, the two cousins and the two cousin in whose house I was living while attending school used to visit my room whenever they had the time. Their knock on my door, no, their knock on my door, no matter how often it came, never failed to startle me so that I almost jumped in fright. Are you studying? No, I would say with a smile. Shutting my book, I would launch into some silly story miles removed from what I was thinking. Today at school, the geography teacher, the one who we call the Walrus. One evening, my cousins came to my room, and after they had compelled me to clown at unmerciful lengths, one of them proposed, Yozo, let's see how you look with these glasses on. Why? Don't make such a fuss. Put them on. Hmm. Okay, I'll continue reading. I just had a thought. Um, Don't make such a fuss. Put them on. Here, take these glasses. They invariably spoke to me in the same harsh, peremptory tones. The clown meekly put on the older girl's glasses. My cousins were convulsed with laughter. You look exactly like him, exactly like Harold Lloyd. The American movie comedian was very popular at the time in Japan. Wait, I forgot how bro looks like. Um oh, that's kind of yeah. Mr. Clockman. He was the clock guy. Yeah, you can search him up. You can search him up, Mr. Lloyd. That girl must have had some round. She has like Harry Potter glasses. Um oops, that's my phone. I'm gonna double check on. I'm just gonna see that everyone is okay. No texts, so I'm gonna assume everyone's fine. I'm gonna take a little sip of water. And then I'll continue. You look exactly like him, exactly like Harold Lloyd. The American movie comedian was very popular at the time in Japan. I stood up. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, raising one arm in greeting, I should like on this occasion to thank all of my Japanese friends, my Japanese fans. Um, I went through the motions of making a speech. They laughed all the harder. From then on, whenever a Harold Lloyd movie came to town, I went to see it and secretly studied his expressions. That's so real. Oh my god, bro. This boy, this guy, this fella is so real. Okay. One autumn evening, I was lying in bed reading a book. The older of my cousins, I always call her sister, suddenly darted into my room quickly as a bird, and then collapsed over my bed. She whispered through her tears, Yozo, you'll help me? I know you will. Let's run away from this terrible house together. Oh, help me, please. She continued in this hysterical vein for a while, only to burst into tears again. This was not the first time that a woman had put on such a scene before me, and sister's excessively emotional words did not surprise me as much. I felt instead a certain boredom in their banality and emptiness. I slipped out of bed, went to my desk, and picked up a persimmon. Here's the thing. I heard them pronounced as persimmon and persimmon, and I don't know which one's correct because I've never heard anyone like concretely say it's pronounced this way. Because some people in my life pronounce it both ways, and I'm like, is it persimmon or persimmon? Is it something else entirely? Who knows? Anyhow, he picks one up. I peeled it and offered it to sister, and offered a sister a section. She ate it, still sobbing, and said, have you any interesting books? Lend me something. I chose Soski's I Am a Cat from a bookshelf and handed it to her. Thanks for the persimmon, Sister said as she left the room, an embarrassed smile on her face. Sister was not the only one. Oh yeah, the fact that you can't comfort people very well. So real. Sister was not the only one. I have often felt that I would find it more complicated, troublesome, and unpleasant to discern the feelings by which a woman lives than a plum than to plumb the innermost thoughts of an earthworm. Long personal experiences has taught me that when a woman suddenly bursts into hysterics, the way to restore her spirits is to give her something sweet. Her young sister, Set-chan, hmm, I wonder, because this is a translation, is it like, is her nickname Set or something? I don't know. Her her younger sister, Set Chan, would often bring friends to my room, and in my usual fashion, I amused them all with perfect impartiality. As soon as a friend had left, Set Chan would tell me disagreeable things about her, inevitably concluding, "She's a bad girl, you must be careful of her." If that's the case, I wanted to say, you needn't have gone to such trouble to bring her here. That's so real, bro. Um, I don't understand people talking behind each other's backs. Like, what's the point? Bro, what's the point? Thanks to Setchan, almost all the visitors to my rooms were girls. This, however, by no means implies that Takaichi's compliment, "women will fall for you," has yet to been realized. I was merely the Harold Lloyd of northeastern Japan. Not for some years would Takaichi's silly statement come palpitatingly alive, metamorph uh, uh, metamorphosed into a sinister prophecy. Takaichi made one other important gift to me. Bro, me when butterfly, crazy. Takaichi made one other important gift to me. One day he came to my room to play. He was waving a brightly colored picture, which he proudly displayed. "It's a picture of a ghost," he explained. I was startled that instant, as I could not help feeling in later years determine my path to escape. I knew what Takaichi was showing me. I knew that it was only the familiar self-portrait of Van Gogh. When we were children, the French Impressionist school was very popular in Japan, and our first introduction to an appreciation of Western painting was most often began with such works. The paintings of Van Gogh. Oh no, no, I have to pronounce like some French names and other names, and ooh, they're so spooky. No, I don't want to pronounce people's names. I'm bad with names. Oh, bro is gonna roast me. You know, I'm just gonna skip it. There's just some guys. There's just some dudes. There's just some white dudes. We're familiar even to students at country schools, mainly through photographic reproductions. I myself had seen a few colored photographs of Van Gogh's paintings. His colored photograph, sorry, his brushwork and the vividness of his colors had intrigued me, but I'd never imagined his pictures to be of ghosts. I took from my bookshelf a volume of Modigliani reproductions and showed Takaichi familiar nudes with skin the color of burnished copper. "How about these? Do you suppose these were ghosts too?" "They're terrific!" Takaichi widened his eyes in admiration. "This one looks like a horse out of hell." "There really are ghosts then, aren't they?" "I wish I could paint pictures of ghosts like that," said Takaichi. "There are some people whose dread of human beings is so morbid that they reach a point where they yearn to see their own eyes monsters of ever more horrible shapes. And the more nervous they are, the quicker to take fright, the more violent they pray that every storm will be." Painters who have had this mentality after repetitive wounds and imitations at the hands of the apparitions called human beings have often come to believe in phantasms. They plainly saw monsters in broad daylight in the midst of nature, and they did not fob people off with clowning. They did their best to depict these monsters just as they had appeared. Takaichi was right. They had dared to paint pictures of the devils. These, I thought, would be my friends in the future. I was so excited I could have wept. "I'm going to paint too. I'm going to paint pictures of ghosts and devils and horses out of hell." My voice Oh, my voice as I spoke these words to Takaichi was lowered to a barely audible whisper. Why, I don't know. Ever since elementary school days, I enjoyed drawing and looking at pictures, but my pictures failed to win the reputation among my fellow students That my comic stories did. I never had the least trust in the opinions of human beings, and my stories represented to me nothing more than the clown's gesture of greeting to his audience. They enraptured all of my teachers, but for me, they were devoid of the slightest interest. Only to my paintings, to the depiction of the object, my cartoons were something else again. I devote any real efforts of my original thought childish style. The copybooks for drawing were used at school were dreary. The teacher's pictures were incredibly inept, and I was obliged to experiment for myself entirely without direction, using every method of expression which came to me. I owned a set of oil paints and brushes from the time I entered high school. I sought to model my techniques on those of the Impressionist school, but my pictures remained flat as paper cutouts, and seemed to offer no promise of ever developing into anything. But Takaichi's words made me aware that my mental attitude towards paintings had been completely mistaken. What superficiality and what stupidity there is in trying to depict in a pretty manner things which no one thought pretty. The masters, through their the masters, through their subjective perceptions, created beauty out of trivialities. They did not hide their interest even in things which were nauseatingly ugly, but soaked themselves in the pleasure of depicting them. In other words, they seemed not to rely in the least on misconceptions of others. Now that I had been initiated by Takaichi in these root secrets of the art of painting, I began to do some self portraits, taking care that they not be seen by my female visitors. The pictures I drew were so heart-rending as to stupefy even myself. Here was the true self I had so desperately hidden. I had smiled cheerfully, I had made others laugh, but this was the harrowing reality. I secretly affirmed this self, was sure that there was no escape from it, but naturally I did not show my pictures to anyone else except Takaichi. I disliked the thought that I might suddenly be subjected to their their suspicious vigilance, when once the nightmarish reality under the clowning was detected. On the other hand, I was equally afraid that they might not recognize my true self once they saw it, but imagine that it was just some new twist to my clowning. Occasion for additional snickers. This would have been most painful of all. I therefore hid the pictures in the back of my cupboard. In school drawing classes, I also kept my secret ghost style techniques and continued to paint as before in the conventional idiom of pretty things. To Takaichi, and to him alone, I could display my easily wounded sensibilities, and I did not hesitate now to show him my self portraits. He was very enthusiastic, and I painted two or three more, plus a picture of a ghost, earning from Takaichi the prediction, "You'll be a great painter one day." Not long afterwards, I went up to Tokyo. On my forehead were imprinted the two prophecies uttered by half-wit Takaichi, that I would be fallen for, and that I would become a great painter. I wanted to enter an art school, but my father put me into college, intending eventually to make a civil servant out of me. This was the sentence passed on me, and I, who have never been able to answer back, dumbly obeyed. Dumbly obeyed. Okay. No, sorry. I wasn't thinking of. I was thinking of. Never mind. My father's suggestion. I took a. Man, I'm gonna take a sip of water. At my father's suggestion, I took the college entrance exam a year early and I passed. By this time, I was really quite weary of my high school by the sea and the cherry blossoms. Once in Tokyo, I immediately began life in a dormitory, but the squalor and violence appalled me. Sorry, what? Appalled me. This time I was in no mood for clowning. I got the doctor to certify that my lungs were affected. I left the dormitory and went to live in my father's townhouse in Uno. Communal living had proved quite impossible for me. It gave me chills just to hear such words as the ardor of youth or youthful pride. I could not be I could not by any stretch of the imagination soak myself in college spirits. The classrooms and the dormitory seemed like the dumping grounds of disordered sexual desires, and even my virtually perfected antics were no use there. When the diet was not in session, my father spent only a week or two of the month at the house. While he was away, while he was away, there would be just the three of us in the rather imposing mansion, an elderly couple who looked after the premises, and myself. I frequently cut classes, but not because I felt like sightseeing in Tokyo. It looks as if I shall end my days without ever having seen the Meiji Shrine or the statue of uh, Kusunoki Mas. Ugh. I should actually read this properly. I don't want to. No disrespect. Kusunoki Masashige, or the tomes of tombs or tomes. I always thought it was tombs. The tombs of the 47 Ronin. Ooh, Ronin. Because that's a look. It's like different. Um, there's if you don't know Ronin, there's different levels of. Anyhow, instead, I would spend whole days in the house reading and painting. When my father was in town, I set out for school promptly every morning, although sometimes I actually went to an art class given by a painter in Hongo and practiced sketching for 3 or 4 hours at a time with him. Having been able to escape from the college dormitory, I felt rather cynically. This may have been my own bias, that I was now in a rather special position. Even if I attended lectures, it was more like an auditor than a regular student. Attending classes became all the more tedious. I had gone through elementary and high schools and was now in college without ever having been able to understand what was meant by a school spirit. I never even tried to learn the school songs. Before long, a student at the art class was to initiate me into the mysteries of drink, cigarettes, prostitutes, pawn shops, and left wing thought. A strange combination, but it actually happened that way. The student's name was Masao Hiroki. He had been born in downtown Tokyo, was 6 years older than myself, and was a graduate of a private art school, having no having no ah I reproduce what? I reproduce. That's not what I meant to say. I readjust myself. Okay, well whatever. Having no atelier at home, he used to attend the art class I frequented, where he was supposedly continuing his studies of oil painting. One day, when we still barely knew each other by sight, we hadn't yet exchanged a word, he suddenly said to me, "Can you lend me 5 yen?" I was so taken aback that I ended up giving him the money. "That's fine," he said. "Now for some liquor. You're my guest." Well, I couldn't very well refuse. I was dragged into a cafe near the school. This marked the beginning of our friendship. "I've been noticing you for quite a while there." That bashful smile, that's a special mark of promising artist. "Now, as a pledge to our friendship, bottoms up." He called one of the waitresses to our table. "Isn't he a handsome boy? You mustn't fall for him now." I'm sorry to say it, but ever since he appeared in our art class, I've only been the second handsomest. No, you've been the third. He's the second, and I'm the first. Hiroki was swarthy, but his features were regular and most unusual for an art student. He always wore a neat suit and conservative necktie. His hair was pomaded and parted in the middle. The surroundings were unfamiliar to me. I kept folding and unfolding my arms nervously, and my smiles now were rather bashful. In the course of drinking 2 or 3 glasses of beer, however, I began to feel a strange lightness of liberation. I started, I've been thinking I'd like to enter a real art school. Don't be silly, they're useless. Schools are all useless. The teachers who immerse themselves in nature, the teachers who show profound sympathy for nature. I felt not the least respect for his opinions. I was thinking, he's a fool and his paintings are rubbish, but he might be a good person for me to go out with. I know a person that would be good for me to go out with. I felt, uh, for the first time in my life, I had met for the first time in my life, I had met a genuine city good for nothing, no less than myself. Though in a different way, he was entirely removed from the activities of the human beings of the world. We were of one species, if only in that we were both disoriented. At the same time, there were a basic difference in us. He operated without being conscious of his partiality, or, for the matter, without giving any recognition to the misery of that partiality. I despised him as one fit only for amusement, a man with whom I associated for the sole purpose. At times, I even felt ashamed of our friendship. But in the end, as the result of going out with him, even Hiroki proved too strong for me. At first, however, I was convinced that Hiroki was a nice fellow, an unusually nice fellow. I'm a nice fella. And despite my habitual dread of human beings, I relaxed my guard to the extent of thinking that I had found a fine guide to Tokyo. To tell the truth, when I first came to the city, I was afraid to board a streetcar because of the conductor. I was afraid to enter the Kabuki theater for the fear of the usherettes, standing along the sides of the red carpet staircase at the main entrance. I was afraid to go into a restaurant because I was intimidated by the waiter's furtivity, furtively hovering behind me, waiting for my plate to be emptied. Most of all, I dreaded paying the bill. My awkwardness when I handed over the money after buying something did not erase something. Ah, I handed over the money after buying something did not arise from any stinginess, but from the excessive tension, excessive embarrassment, excessive uneasiness, and apprehension. My eyes would swim in my head, and the whole world grow dark before me, so that I felt half out of my mind. There was no question of bargaining. Not only did I often forget to pick up my change, but I quite frequently forgot to take home the things that I had purchased. It was quite impossible for me to make my way around Tokyo by myself. I had no choice but to spend the whole days at a time lollying around the house. So I turned my money over to Hiroki, and the two of us went out together. He was a great bargainer, and this perhaps earned him the ranking of expert in pleasure seeking. He displayed unusual proficiency in spending minimal sums of money with maximum effect. His talents extended to getting whatever he wanted in the shortest possible time without ever having resource to taxis. He had by turns as seemed appropriate the streetcar, the bus, and even stem launches into the river. I'm gonna just check how many pages I have left. Give me a moment. Sheesh. I This ends at 97 and I'm on 63. Okay. He gave me a practical education, Thus, if we stopped in the morning at a certain restaurant on our way home from a prostitute's and had a bath with our meal, it was a cheap way of experiencing the sensation of living luxuriously. He also explained that beef with rice or skewered chicken, the sorts of dishes you can get at a roadside stand, are cheap but nourishing. He guaranteed that nothing got you drunker or quicker than brandy. Hmm, someone knows a bit about that. At any rate, as far as the bill was concerned, he never caused me to feel the least anxiety or fear. Another thing which saved me when Hiroki was, oh sorry, another thing that saved me, when with Hiroki was that he was completely uninterested in what his listener might be thinking, and could pour forth a continuous stream of nonsensical chatter 24 hours a day in whichever direction the eruption of his passions led him. Passions in little quotations. It may have been that his passions consisted in ignoring the feelings of his listener. His loquacy ensured that there would be absolutely no danger of falling into uncomfortable silences when our pleasures had fatigued us. In dealings with other people, I had always been on my guard lest those frightful silences occur. But since I was naturally slow of speech, I could only stave them off by a desperate recourse to clowning. Now, however, that stupid Hiroki, quite without realizing it, was playing the part of the clown, and I was under no obligation to make appropriate answers. It sufficed if I merely let the stream of his words flow through my ears, and once in a while commented with a smile, "Not really." I soon came to understand that drink, tobacco, and prostitutes were all excellent means of dissipating, even for a few moments, my dread of human beings. I came even to feel that if I had to sell every last possession to obtain these means of escape, it would be well worth it. I never could think of prostitutes as human beings or even as women. They seemed more like imbeciles or lunatics. But in their arms, I felt absolute security. In someone's arms, I feel absolute security. I could sleep soundly. It was pathetic how utterly devoid of greed they really were, and perhaps because they felt for me something like an affinity for their kind. These prostitutes always showed me a natural friendliness which never became oppressive. Friendliness with no ulterior motive, friendliness stripped of high pressure salesmen for someone who might never come again. Some nights I saw these imbecile, lunatic prostitutes with the halo of Mary. I went to them to escape from my dread of human beings, to seek a mere night of repose, but in the process of diverting myself with these kindred prostitutes, I seemed to have acquired, before I was aware of it, a certain offensive atmosphere which clung inseparably to me. This was a quite unexpected byproduct of my experience, but gradually it became more manifest until Hiroki pointed it out to my amazement and consideration. I had, quite objectively speaking, passed through an apprenticeship in women at the hands of prostitutes, and I had of late become quite adept. The severest apprenticeship in woman, they say, is with prostitutes, and that makes it the most effective. The odor of the lady killer come to permanent me. Had come to permeate me, and women, not only prostitutes, instinctively detected it and flocked to me. This obscene and inglorious atmosphere was the bonus I received, and it was apparently far more noticeable than the recuperative effects of my apprenticeship. Hiroki informed me of it, half as a compliment, I suppose, but it struck a painful chord in me. I remembered how clumsily written letters from bar girls, and the general's daughter, and a girl of 20 whose house was next to mine, and who every morning when I went to school was always hovering around her gate, all dressed up for no apparent reason, and the waitress at the steak restaurant who, even when I didn't say a word, and the girl at the tobacco shop I patronized who always put in the package of cigarettes she handed me, and the woman in the seat next to mine at the kabuki theater, and the time when I was drunk and fell asleep on the streetcar in the middle of the night, and the letter burning with passion that came unexpectedly from a girl relative in the country, and the girl, whoever it was, who left a doll when she'd made herself for me when I was away. With all of them, I had been extremely negative, and the stories had gone no further, remaining undeveloped fragments. But it was an undeniable fact, and not just some foolish delusion on my part, that there lingered about me an atmosphere which would send a woman into sentimental reveres. It caused me a bitterness akin to shame to have this pointed out by someone like Hiroki. At the time, I suddenly lost all interest in prostitutes. To show off his modernity, I can't think of any other reason, Hiroki also took me. Okay, this is a thing that's kind of hard to. I don't know how to point. Oh, there's quite a few words when describing people, like kindred prostitutes, or having an inglorious atmosphere that was a bonus to show off his modernity. Like those kind of things are in quotes that are kind of like air quotes as a mocking, like not, it's like it's not really sort of thing. So sometimes when I read a sentence, I'll emphasize that word because to me it's like, oh, that word's not what it really means. But I don't know how else to, because I don't like saying in quotes all the time. Anyhow, I can't think of any other reason. Hiroki also took me one day to a secret communist meeting. I don't remember exactly what it was called. A reading society, I think, in little quotes. A secret communist meeting may have been for Hiroki just one more of the sights of Tokyo. I was introduced to the comrades, little quotes, and obliged to buy a pamphlet. I then heard a lecture on Marxian economics delivered by an extraordinarily ugly young man. The guests of honor. Everything he said seemed exceedingly obvious and undoubtedly true, but I felt sure that something more obscure, more frightening lurked in the hearts of human beings. Greed did not cover it, nor did vanity, nor was it simply a combination of lust and greed. I wasn't sure what it was, but I felt that there was something inexplicable at the bottom of human society which was not reducible to economics. Terrified as I was by this weird element, extended to materialism was I extended to materialism as naturally as water finding its own level. But materialism could not free me from my dread of human beings. I could not feel the joy of hope a man experiences when he opens his eyes on young leaves. Nevertheless, I regularly attended the meetings of the Reading Society. I found it uproaringly amusing to see my comrades, in little quotes, their faces tense as though they were discussing matters of life and death, absorbed in the study of theories so elementary they were on the order of one and one makes two, in little quotes. I tried to take some of the strain out of the meetings with my usual antics. That is why, I imagine, the oppressive atmosphere of the group gradually relaxed. I came to be so popular that I was considered indispensable at their meetings. These simple people perhaps fancied that I was just as simple as they, an optimistic, laughter loving comrade. But if such was their view, I was deceiving them completely. I was not their comrade, yet I attended every single meeting and performed for them my full repertory of farce. I did it because I liked to, because those people pleased me, and not necessarily because we were linked by any common affection derived by from Marx. Irrationally, I found the thought faintly pleasurable, or rather, I felt at ease with it. What frightened me was the logic of the world, and in it lay the foretaste of something incalculably powerful. Its mechanism was incomprehensible, and I could not possibly remain closeted in that windowless, bone-chilling room. Though outside lay the sea of irrationality, it was far more agreeable to swim in its waters until presently I drowned. People talk of social outcasts. The words apparently denote the miserable losers of the world, the vicarious ones. But I feel as though I had been a social outcast from the moment I was born. If ever I had met someone society is if ever I had met someone society is designated as an outcast, I increase invariably felt affection for him, an emotion which carries me away in melting tenderness. People also talk of a criminal consciousness. All my life in the world of human beings, I've been tortured by such a consciousness, but it has been my faithful companion, like a wife in poverty, and together, just the two of us, we had indulged in our forlorn pleasures. This, perhaps, had been one of the attitudes in which I had gone on living. People also commonly speak of the wound of a guilty conscience. In my case, the wound appeared on itself when I was an infant, and with the passage of time, far from healing, it had grown only the deeper, until now it has reached the bone. The agonies I have suffered night after night had made for hell composed of an infinite diversity of tortures. But through this is a very strange way to put it. The wound has gradually become dearer to me than my own flesh and blood, and I have thought its pain to be the emotion of a wound as it lived, or even its murmur of affection. Little pause here. I'm gonna probably go get some water. Also, I was gonna talk about how really I noticed I sometimes when I read, I tend to zone out, but even when I'm reading out loud, I read out the words as I zone out. And only when I start to pay attention, I lose the place that I am, but otherwise, I continue zoning out. And I do that when I read scripts too, interestingly enough. But I know a lot of people do it, but I've never noticed people doing it when they read out loud. But apparently, I still do. Okay. I'm gonna go get some water and I'm gonna be back. Where did I stop reading? Okay, I know where I stopped reading. I'm gonna go grab some water. I'll be back. Okay. For such a person as myself, the atmosphere of an underground movement was curiously soothing and agreeable. What appealed to me, in other words, was not so much its basic aim as its personality. The movement served Hiroki merely as a pretext for idiotic banter. The only meeting he had attended was the one where he introduced me. He gave as his reasons for not coming again the stupid joke that Marxists should study not only the productive aspects of society, but the consumptive, when I consume something, ones. At any rate, the consumptive, well, I can't speak. I need to drink more water. I've been reading for like 2 hours. I can't speak for that long, but somehow I manage. Um, consumptive, consump. I can't pronounce things anymore. That's okay. When I think back on it now, in those days, there were Marxists of every variety. Some, like Hiroki, called themselves such out of an empty modernity, in little quotes. An attraction for its odor of irrationality led others, like myself, to participate in the movement. I am sure that if the true believers in Marxism had discovered what Hiroki and I were really interested in, they would have been furious with us and driven us out immediately as vile traitors. Strange to say, however, neither Hiroki nor I ever came close to being expelled. On the contrary, I felt so much more relaxed in this irrational world than in the world of rational gentlemen that I was able to do what was expected of me in a sound manner. Sound in little little quotes. I was therefore considered a promising comrade and entrusted with various jobs fraught with a ludicrous degree of secrecy. As a matter of fact, I never once refused any one of their jobs. Curiously docile, I performed whatever they asked of me with such unruffled assurance that the dogs, in little air quotes, and then with little parentheses, that was the name by which the comrades referred to the police, suspected nothing, and I was never so much as picked up for the questioning. Smiling, masking others' smile, I punctually acquitted myself of all their dangerous missions, in little air quotes. The people in the movement observed such excessive precautions. They were perpetually prey to live and death tensions as to suggest some clumsy imitation of a detective novel. The missions in which I was employed were really of this stupefying and consequentiality, but the comrade kept themselves worked up into a state of frantic excitement by incessantly reminding themselves how dangerous these errands were. I felt at the time that if I should become a party member and got caught, not even the prospect of spending the rest of my life in prison would bother me. It occurred to me that prison life might actually be pleasanter than groaning away my sleepless nights in a hellish dread of the realities of life, in little quotes, as led by human beings. Even when my father and I were living in the same house, he was kept so busy receiving guests or going out that some 3 or 4 days elapsed without our seeing each other. This, however, did not make his presence any less oppressive and intimidating. I was just thinking, without as yet dare to oppose it, how I would like to leave the house and find lodgings elsewhere when I learned from our old caretaker that my father apparently intended to sell the house. Father's terms of office as a member of the Diet would soon expire, doubtless for many reasons. He seemed to have no intention of standing for election again. Perhaps, I do not pretend to understand my father's thoughts any better than those of a stranger. He had decided to build a retreat somewhere at home. He had never had much he had never felt much affection for Tokyo, and he must have concluded that it was pointless to maintain a house with servants just for the convenience of a mere college student like myself. At any rate, the house was sold before long, and I moved to a gloomy room in an old lodging house in Hongo, where I was immediately beset by financial worries. My father had been giving me a fixed allowance for spending money each month. It would disappear in 2 or 3 days' time, but there had always been cigarettes, liquor, and fruit in the house, and other things, books, stationaries, and anything in the way of clothing could be charged at shops in the neighborhood. As long as it was one of the shops my father's patronized, it made no difference, even if I left the place without offering so much as a word of explanation. Then suddenly I was thrown on my own in lodgings and had to make ends meet on the allowance doled out each month from home. I was quite at my wits' end. The allowance disappeared in the customary 2 or 3 days, and I would be almost wild with fright and despair. I sent off barrages of telegrams begging for money of my father, my brothers, and my sisters by turn. In the wake of the telegrams went letters of giving details. The facts as stated in the letters were absurd fabrications without expectation. I thought it a good strategy to make people laugh when asking favors of them. Under Hiroki's tutelage, I began to frequent the pawn shops. Despite everything, I was chronically short of money. And I was incapable of living all by myself in these lodgings where I didn't even know a soul. It terrified me to sit by myself quietly in a room. I felt frightened, as if I might be set upon or struck by someone at any moment. I would rush outside either to help in the activities of the movement or make the rounds of the bars with Hiroki, drinking cheap sake wherever we went. I almost completely neglected both my schoolwork and my paintings. Then, in November of my second year in college, I got involved in a love suicide with a married woman older than myself. This changed everything. That's prevalent in a certain story. Lover suicide. Double suicide, lover suicide. Not always an agreement. I had stopped attending classes and no longer devoted a minute of study to my courses. Amazingly enough, I seemed nevertheless to be able to give sensible answers in the examinations, and I managed somehow to keep my family under the delusion that all was well. But my poor attendance finally caused the school to send my father a confidential report. My elder brother, acting on behalf of my father, thereupon addressed me a long, sternly phrased letter, warning me to change my ways. More pressing causes of grief to me were my lack of money and the jobs required of me by the movement, which had become so frequent and fun, frenetic that I could no longer perform them half in the spirit of fun. I had been chosen leader of all the Marxist students' action groups in the school of Central Tokyo. I raced about here and there, maintaining leisure, sorry, liation in little air quotes. In my rain coat pocket, I carried a little knife I had bought for use in the event of an armed uprising. I remember how it had been a delicate blade, hardly strong enough to sharpen a pencil. My fondest wish was to drink myself into a sound stupor, but I hadn't the money. Requests for my services came from the party so frequently that I scarcely had the time to catch my breath. A sickly body like mine wasn't up to such frantic activity. My only reason all along for helping the group had been my own fascination with its irrationality, and to become so horribly involved was a quite unforeseen consequence of my joke. So real. I felt secretly like telling the group, "This isn't my business. Why don't you get a regular party man to do it?" Unable to suppress such reactions of annoyance, I escaped. I escaped, but it gave me no pleasure. I decided to kill myself. There were, at that time, three women who showed me special affection. One of them was the landlord's daughter at my lodgings house. When I would come back to my room, so exhausted by my errands for the movement that I fell into bed without even bothering to eat, she invariably would visit my room, carrying in her hand a writing pad and pen. "Excuse me, it's so noisy downstairs with my sister and my little brother that I couldn't collect my thoughts enough to write a letter." She would seat herself at my desk and write, sometimes for over an hour. Hmm. It would have been so much simpler if I had just lay there and pretend not to be aware of her, but the girl's looks betrayed only too plainly that she wanted me to talk, and though I had not the least desire to utter a word, I would display my usual spirit of passive service. I would turn over on my belly with a grunt and, puffing on a cigarette, began, "I'm told that some men heat their bath water by burning the love letters that they get by women. How horrid! It must be you. As a matter of fact, I have boiled the milk that way and drunk it too. What an honor for a girl! Use mine next time." Ugh. If only she would go, quickly. Letter indeed. What a transparent pretext that was. I'm sure she was writing the alphabet or the days of the week and the months. "Show me what you've written," I said, although I wanted desperately to avoid looking at it. No, I won't, she protested. Oh, you're dreadful. Her joy was indiscriminate enough to chill all feeling for her. I thought up an errand for her to do. Sorry to bother you, but would you mind going down to the drugstore and buying me some sleeping tablets? I'm overexhausted. My face is burning, so I can't sleep. I'm sorry. And about the money. That's all right. Don't worry about the money. She got up happily. I was well aware that it never offends a woman to be asked to do an errand. They are delighted if some man designs to ask them a favor. Sorry, some man deigns to ask them a favor. The second girl interested in me was a comrade, in little air quotes, a student in a teacher's training college. My activities and the movement obligated me, distasteful as it was, to see her every day. Even after arrangements for the day's job had been completed, she doggedly tagged along after me. She brought me presents, seemingly at random, and offered me them with the words, "I wish you would think of me as your real sister." Wincing at the affection, I would answer, "I do," and force a sad little smile. I was afraid of angering her, and my only thought was to temporize somehow and put her off. As a result, I spent more and more time dancing attendance on that ugly, disagreeable girl. I let her buy me presents. They were without exception in extraordinarily bad taste, and I usually dispose of them immediately to the postman or to the grocery boy. I tried to look happy when I was with her and made her laugh with my jokes. One summer evening, she simply wouldn't leave me. In the hopes of persuading her to go, I kissed her. When we came to a dark place along the street, she became uncontrollably, shamefully excited. She hailed a taxi and took me to the little room the moment secret sorry, the movement secretly rented an office building. There we spent the whole night in a wild tumult. What an extraordinary sister I have, I told myself with a wry smile. The circumstances were such that I had no way to avoiding the landlord's daughter or this comrade. Every day we bumped into one another, and I couldn't dodge them as I had various other women in the past. Before I had known what was happening, my chronic lack of assurance had driven me willy-nilly into desperate attempts to integrate myself with both of them. It was just as if I were bound to them by some ancient debt. It was at this same period that I became the unexpected beneficiary of the kindness of a waitress in one of those big cafes on the Ginza. Hold on, I'm gonna pause to text someone really quick. Okay, I'm gonna take a little sip of water. I hope you take this moment to take care of yourself as well. Honestly, I feel a little sick the way my throat and nasal cavity is acting. I can't really speak properly, and when I make certain sounds, it gets muffled, and I feel a little tense, but we'll see how this works out. I'm just dehydrated, I think. Mm. It was at the same period that I became the unexpected beneficiary of the kindness of a waitress in one of those big cafes on the Ginza. After just one meeting, I was so tired by gratitude to her that worry and empty fears paralyzed me. I had learned by this time to simulate sufficiently well the audacity required to board a streetcar by myself or to go to the kabuki theater or even a cafe without guidance from Hiroki. Inwardly, I was no less suspicious than before of the assurance and the violence of human beings, but on the surface, I had learned a bit. I've learned bit by bit the art of meeting people with a straight face. No, that's not true. I've never been able to meet anyone without an accompaniment of painful smiles, the buffoonery of defeat. What I had acquired was the technique of a scammer, scamming somehow almost in a daze the necessary small talk. Stammering, not scamming, stammering. This was a product of my activities on behalf. Was this a product of my activities on behalf of the movement, or of women, or liquor? Perhaps it was the chief la- uh, chiefly being hard up for cash that perfected the skill. I felt afraid no matter where I was. I wondered if the best way to obtain more s- surcease from this relentless feeling might not be to lose myself in the world of some big cafe where I would be rubbed against by crowds of drunken guests, waitresses, and porters. With this thought in mind, I went one day alone to the cafe on the Ginza. I had only 10 yen on me. I said with a smile to the hostess who sat down beside me, "All I got is 10 yen. Consider yourself warned." "You needn't worry." She spoke with a trace of a Kansai accent. It was strange how she calmed my agitation with those few words. No, it was not simply because I was relieved of the necessity. There's also a really famous painting of the Ginza. Anyhow, no, it was not simply because I was relieved of the necessity of worrying about money. I felt, rather, as if being next to her in itself made it unnecessary to worry. I drank the liquor, she did not intimidate me, and I felt no obligation to perform my clownish antics for her. I drank in silence, not bothering to hide the taciturnity and gloominess which were my true nature. She put various appetizers on the table in front of me. "Do you like them?" I shook my head. "Only liquor? I'll have a drink too." It was a cold autumn night, and I was waiting at the sushi. Oh, I want some sushi. That would be lovely. Maybe I should have that on the 23rd. Treat myself a little bit. No, I mean, I really usually only eat like that when I'm with friends, so maybe I'll invite Crystal when we're together and go out somewhere. A new all you can eat diner opened up. We can go there and look at it. Just because I've never been there before. There used to be a what was it called? Home something. Home It went out of business. They went out of business a long time ago. Something diner. Home something diner. I'll search it up because I feel like it. I used to enjoy going there as a kid. All the time. Whenever we'd go to a movie theater, I'd go there. And when I celebrated birthdays, I would go there. Well, not like birthdays, but like, well, how do I say this? Like any special events are usually on like a holiday. We'd go there, not birthdays. I don't know why I said that. It's not true. Um, Hmm. I don't remember what it was. Something home diner, I feel like. It's like home something. I don't know, man. I remember there was a garage sale once, and I saw there was a pin of that diner, and I was like, I didn't even know they had merch, but I was like, wow, okay. It was a cold autumn night. I was waiting at the sushi stall back at Ginza for Tsuneko. That, as I recall, was her name, but the memory of it was too blurred for me to be sure. I'm the sort of person who can forget even the name of a woman whom he attempted suicide. Tsuneko. Tsuneko is such a pretty name. I probably also think that because I love the sound tsu and she has neko in the name. Come on. Anyhow, the sushi I was eating had nothing to recommend it. Why, when I have forgotten her name, should I be able to remember so clearly how bad the sushi tasted? And I can recall with absolute clarity the close cropped head of the old man. His face was like a snake's, wagging from side to side as he made the sushi, trying to create the illusion that he was the real expert. It has happened to me 2 or 3 times since I'd seen on the streetcar what seemed to be a familiar face and wondered who it was, only to realize with a start that the person opposite to me looked like the old man from the sushi stall. Now, when her name and even her face are fading from my memory, for me to be able to remember that old man's face so accurately I could draw it is surely proof of how bad the sushi was and how it chilled and distressed me. I should add that even when I've been taken to restaurants famous for sushi, I've never enjoyed it much. Tsuneko was living in a room she rented on the second floor of a carpenter's house. I lay on the floor sipping tea, propping my cheek with one hand as if I had a horrible toothache. I had no pains to hide my habitual gloom. Oddly enough, she seemed to like seeing me lie there that way. She gave the impression of standing completely isolated. An icy storm whipped around her, leaving only dead leaves careening wildly down. As we lay there together, she told me that she was 2 years older than I, and that she came from Hiroshima. I have a husband, you know. He used to be a barber in Hiroshima, but we ran away to Tokyo together at the end of Oh, sorry, I was reading in her voice wrong. I got a husband, you know. He used to be a barber in Hiroshima, but we ran away to Tokyo together at the end of last year. My husband couldn't find a decent job in Tokyo, and next thing I knew, he was picked up for swindling someone, and now he's in jail. I've been going to the prison every day, but beginning tomorrow, I'm not going anymore. She rambled on, but I've never been able to get interested in when women talk about themselves. It may be because women are so inept at telling a story. That is, because they place the emphasis in the wrong places. Or for some other reason. In any case, I've always turned them a deaf ear. I feel so unhappy. I'm sure that this one phrase whispered to me would arouse my sympathy more than the longest, most painstaking account of a woman's life. It amazes and astonishes me that I have never once heard a woman make this simple statement. This woman did not say, I feel so unhappy, in so many words, but something like a silent current of misery an inch wide flowed over the surface of her body. When I lay next to her, my body was enveloped in her current, which mingled with my own harsher current of gloom like a withered leaf settling to rest on the stones at the bottom of a pool. I had freed myself from fear and uneasiness. It was entirely different from the feeling of being able to sleep soundly, which I had experienced in the arms of those idiot prostitutes. For one thing, the prostitutes were cheerful. The night I had spent with a criminal's wife was, for me, a night of liberation and happiness. The use of so bold a word affirmatively without hesitation will not, I imagine, reoccur in these notebooks. But I had lasted only one night. In the morning, when I woke and got out of bed, I was again the shallow pursuer of a clown, the weak fear happiness itself. They can harm themselves on cotton wool. Sometimes they are wounded even by happiness. I was impatient to leave her while things still stood the same before I got wounded and I spread my usual smokescreen of farce. They say that love flies out the window when poverty comes in the door, but people generally get the scene backwards. It doesn't mean that when a man's money runs out, he's shaken off by women. When he runs out of money, he's naturally is in the dumps. He's no good for anything. The strength goes out of his laugh. He becomes strangely soured. Finally, in desperation, he shakes off the woman. The proverb means that when a man becomes half mad, he will shake and shake and shake until he's free of a woman. You will find that explanation is given in the Kanazawa Dictionary. More's the pity. It is too hard for me to understand that feeling myself. I remember making Tsuneko laugh with just such stupid remarks. I was trying to get away quickly that morning without so much as washing my face, for I was sure that to stay any longer would be useless and dangerous. Then I came out with that crazy pronouncement on love flying out the window, which was later to produce unexpected complications. I didn't meet my benefactors of the night again for a whole month. After leaving her, my happiness grew fainter every day that went by. It frightened me even that I had accepted a moment's kindness. I felt I'd imposed horrible bonds on myself. Gradually, even the mundane fact that Tsuneko had paid the bill at the cafe began to weigh on me, and I felt as though she was just another threatening woman, like the girl at my lodgings house or the girl from the teacher's training college. Even at the distance which separated us, Tsuneko intimidated me constantly. Besides, I was intolerably afraid that if I met again a woman I had once slept with, I might suddenly burst into a flaming rage. It was my nature to be very timid about meeting people anyway, and so I finally chose the expectant of keeping a safe distance from the Ginza. This timidity, timidity of nature was no trickery on my part. Women do not bring to bear so much as a particle of connection between what they do after going to bed and what they do on rising in the morning. They go on living with their world successfully divided in two, as if total oblivion has intervened. My trouble was that if I could not yet successfully cope with this extraordinary phenomenon. At the tail end of November, I went drinking with Hiroki at a cheap bar in Kanda. What? Kanda. In Kanda? Anyways, we had no sooner staggered out of that bar than my evil companion began to insist that we continue our drinking somewhere else. We'd already run out of money, but he kept on badgering me. Finally, and this was because I was drunker and bolder than usual, I said, "All right, I'll take you to the land of dreams. Do not be surprised at what you see. Wine, women, and song." "You mean a cafe?" "I do." "Let's go." It happened just as simply as that. The two of us got on a streetcar, Hiroki said in high spirits. "I'm starved for a woman tonight. Is it all right to kiss the hostess?" If I'm the hostess, you can. Sorry, what? There's like something in my eyes. There we go. It's like a little fluff on my eyelashes. I was not particularly fond of Hiroki when he played the drunk that way. Hiroki knew it, and he deliberately labored the point. All right, I'm going to kiss her. I'm going to kiss whichever hostess sits next to me, all right? It won't make any difference, I suppose. Thanks, I'm starved for women. We got off at the Ginza and walked into the cafe of wine, women, and song. I was virtually without a penny, and my only hope was Tsuneko. Hiroki and I sat down at the vacant booth facing each other. Tsuneko and another hostess immediately hurried over. The other girl sat next to me, and Tsuneko plopped herself beside Hiroki. And I was taken aback. Tsuneko was going to be kissed in another few minutes. It wasn't that I regretted losing her. I never had the faintest craving for possessions. Only in a while, it is true, I had experienced a vague sense of regret at losing something, but never strongly enough to affirm positively or to contest with others my rights of possessions. This is so true of me that some years later I even watched in silence one of my when my own wife was violated. Oh my god. Bro. Um ooh. Okay. Um I've tried insofar to as possible to avoid getting involved in the sordid complications of human beings. I have been afraid of being sucked down into their bottomless whirlpools. Tsunekos and I were lovers of just one night. She did not belong to me. It was unlikely that I would pretend to so imperious an emotion as regret, in little quotations. And yet I was shocked. It was because I felt sorry for Tsuneko, sorry that she should be obliged to accept Hiroki's savage kisses while I watched. Once she had been defiled by Hiroki, she would no doubt have to leave me, but my ardor was not possessive enough for me to stop Tsuneko. I experienced an instance of shock at her unhappiness. I thought, it's all over now. Then, in a moment, I meekly, helplessly resigned myself. I looked from Hiroki to Tsuneko. I grinned, but the situation took an unexpected turn, one for much worse. I've had enough, Hiroki said with a scowl. Not even a lecher like myself can kiss a woman who looks so poverty-stricken. He folded his arms and stared, seemingly in utter disgust at Tsuneko. He forced a smile. Some liquor, I haven't got any money. I spoke under my breath. Some liquor, I haven't got any money. I spoke under my breath to Tsuneko. I felt I wanted to drink till I drowned in it. Tsuneko was in the eyes of the world unworthy even of a drunkard's kiss, a wretched woman who smelled of poverty. Astonishingly, incredibly enough, this realization struck me with the force of a thunderbolt. I drank more that night than ever before in my life. More, more. My eyes swam with drink, and every time Tsuneko and I looked in each other's face, we gave a polite little smile, pathetic little smile. Yes, just like Hiroki had said, she really was a tired, poverty stricken woman and nothing more. But this thought itself was accompanied by a welling up of a feeling of comradeship for this fellow sufferer from poverty. The clash between the rich and the poor is a hackneyed enough subject, and I am now convinced that it really is one of the eternal themes of a drama. I felt pity for Tsuneko. For the first time in my life, I was conscious of a positive, if feeble, moment of love in my heart. I vomited. I passed out. This was also the first time I had ever drunk so much as to lose my consciousness. How many pages do I have left? Quite a few. When I awoke, Tsuneko was sitting by my pillow. I had been sleeping in her room on the second floor of the carpenter's house. I thought you were joking when you told me that love flew out the window when poverty came in the door. Were you serious? You didn't come any more. What a complicated business it is, love and poverty. Suppose I work for you. Wouldn't that be all right? No, it wouldn't. She lay down beside me. Towards dawn, she pronounced for the first time the word death. She seemed to be weary beyond endurance of the task of being a human being, and when I reflected on my dread of the world and its bothersomeness, on money, the movement, women, my studies, it seemed impossible that I could go on living. I contested easily to her proposal. Nevertheless, I was still unable to persuade myself fully of the reality of this resolution to die. Somehow there lurked an element of make believe. The two of us spent that morning wandering around Asakusa. We went into a lunch stand and drank a glass of milk. Ooh, I want to do that. She said, "You pay this time." I stood up, took out my wallet, and opened it. 3 copper coins. It was less shame than horror that assaulted me at that moment. I suddenly saw before my eyes my room in the lodging house, absolutely empty save for my school uniform and the bedding, a bleak cell devoid of any object which might be pawned. My only other possessions were the kimono and coat I was wearing. These were the hard facts. I persevered with clarity that I could not go on living. As I stood there hesitating, she got up and looked inside my wallet. "Is that all you have?" Her voice was innocent, but it cut me to the quick. It was painful, as only the voice of the first woman I have ever loved could be painful. "Is that all?" No, even the suggested more money that I had. 3 copper coins doesn't count as money at all. This was a humiliation more strange than any I'd tasted before, a humiliation I could not live with. I supposed I'd still not managed to extricate myself from the part of the rich man's son. It was then that I myself determined, this time as a reality, to kill myself. We threw ourselves into the sea at Kamakura that night. She untied her sash, saying she had borrowed it from a friend at a cafe, and left it folded neatly on a rock. I removed my coat and put it on the same spot. We entered the water together. She died. I was saved. The incident was treated rather prominently in the press, no doubt because I was a college student. My father's name also had some news value. I was confined in a hospital on the coast. A relative came from home to see me and to take care of necessary arrangements. Before he had left, he had informed me that my father and all the rest of my family were so enraged that I might easily be disowned once and for all. Such matters did not concern me. I thought, instead of the dead Tsuneko and longing for her, I wept. Of all the people I'd ever known, that miserable Tsuneko really was the only one that I loved. A long letter, which consisted of a string of 50 stanzas, came from a girl at my lodgings house. 50 stanzas, each one beginning with the incredible words, "Please live on for me." The nurses used to visit my sick room, laughing gaily at the all the time. Some would squeeze my hand when they left. They discovered at the hospital that my left lung was affected. This was most fortunate for me. When not long afterwards I was taken from the hospital to the police station, charged with having been the accomplice to a suicide, I was treated as a sick man by the police, quartered not with quartered not with the criminals, but in a special custody room. Late that night, the old policeman, standing night duty in the room next to mine, softly opened the door. "Hey," he called out to me, "you must be cold. Come here next to the fire." I walked into his room, sat on a chair, and warmed myself by the fire. I feigned an air of utter dejection. "You miss her, don't you?" "Yes," I answered in a peculiar, faint, and faraway voice. "That's human nature, I guess." His manner had become increasingly self-important. "Where was it that you first took up with this woman?" The question was weighed with a authority almost indistinguishable from that of a judge. My jailer, despising me as a mere child who wouldn't know the difference, acted exactly as if he were charged with the investigation. No doubt he was secretly hoping to while away the long autumn evening by extracting from me a confession in the nature of a pornographic story. I guessed his intent at once, and it was all I could do to restrain the impulse to burst out laughing in his face. I knew that I had the right to refuse to answer any queries put on me by the policeman in a informal interrogation, in quotes, of this sort. But in order to lend some interest to the long night ahead, I cloaked myself in a kind of simple sincerity, as I firmly, unquestionably believed in that this policeman was responsible for investigating me, and that the degree of severity of my punishment depended solely on his decision. I made up a confession absurd enough to satisfy, more or less, his prudent curiosity. I got a pretty good idea now. We always take it into consideration when a prisoner answers everything honestly. Thank you very much. I hope you'll do what you can to help me. My performance was all but inspired, a great performance which brought me no benefit whatsoever. In the morning, I was called before the police chief. This time, it was a real examination. As soon as I opened the door and entered his office, the police chief said, "There's a handsome young lad. There's a handsome lad for you. It wasn't your fault, I can see. Your mother's to blame for having brought such a handsome boy into the world." He was still young, a dark complexioned man with something about him which suggested a university education. His words caught me off guard and made me as wretched as if I had been born deformed, with a red macula covering half my face. The examination conducted by this athletic-looking police chief was simple and to the point, and a world removed from the furtive, tenaciously obscene examination, little quote unquote, the old policeman had given me the night before. After he finished his questioning, he filled out a form to send to the district attorney's office. He commented as he wrote, "You mustn't neglect your health that way. You've been coughing blood, haven't you?" That morning I had an odd hawking cough, and every time I coughed, I covered my mouth with my handkerchief. The handkerchief was splattered with blood, but it was not blood from my throat. That night before, I had been picking at my pimple under my ear, and the blood was from that pimple. Realizing at once it would be to my advantage not to reveal the truth, I lowered my eyes and sanctimoniously murmured, "Yes." The police chief finished writing the paper. "It's up to the district attorney whether or not they bring action against you, but it would be a good idea to telephone or telegraph a guarantor to come to the district attorney's office in Yokohama." Yokohama Station. Yokohama. I know that from quite a few things. Yokohama Station. Okay. In Yokohama. In Yokohama. And Yokohama. Why am I saying Yokohama? Bruh. Yokohama. There must be someone, isn't there, who will guarantee you or offer bail? I remembered that a man from my hometown, an antique dealer who was a frequent visitor of my father's house in Tokyo, had served as a guarantor at school. It was a short-set man of 40, a bachelor, and a henchman of my father's. His face, particularly around the eyes, looked much like a flat fish, that my father always called him by that name. I had also always thought of him as Flatfish, in little quotes. I had borrowed the telephone directory at the police station to look up Flatfish's number. I found it and called him. I asked him if he would mind coming to Yokohama. Flatfish's tone when he answered was unrecognizably officious, but he agreed in the end to be my guarantor. I went back to the custody room. The police chief's loud voice reached me as he barked out to the policeman, "Hey, somebody disinfect the telephone receiver. He's been coughing blood, you know." In the afternoon, they tied me up with a thin hemp rope. I was allowed to hide the rope under my coat when we went outside, but the young policeman gripped the end of the rope firmly. We went to the Yokohama station, Yokohama on the streetcar. The experience hadn't upset me in the least. I missed the custody room and the police station and even the old policeman. What, I wonder, makes me that way? What, I wonder, makes me that way? When they tied me up. What they tied me up as a criminal, I actually felt relieved. A calm, relaxed feeling. Even now, as I write down my recollections of those days, I feel a really expansive, agreeable sensation. But among my otherwise nostalgic memories, there is one harrowing disaster which I shall never be able to forget, and which even now causes me to break out in a cold sweat. I was given a brief examination by a district attorney in his dimly lit office. He was a man of about 40, with an intelligent calm about him, which I am tempted to call honest good looks, in little quotes, and then parentheses, in contrast to my own alleged good looks, which, even if true, certainly are tainted with lewdness. He seemed so simple and straightforward that I let down my guard completely. I was listlessly recounting my story when I suddenly seized with another coughing fit, took out my handkerchief, and the bloodstains caught my eye. And with ignoble optimism, I thought that this cough might also prove useful. I added a couple extra, exaggerated coughs for good measure, and my mouth still covered by my handkerchief, I glanced at the district attorney's face. The next instant he asked with a quiet smile, "Was that real?" Even now, the recollection makes me feel so embarrassed I can't sit still. It was worse, I am sure, even then when in high school I was plummeted into hell by that stupid Takaichi tapping me on the back and saying, "You did it on purpose." Those were the two great disasters in a lifetime of acting. Sometimes I've even thought that I should have preferred to be sentenced to 10 years imprisonment rather than meet with such gentle contempt from the district attorney. The charge against me was suspended, but this brought no joy. I felt utterly wretched as I sat on the bench in the corridor outside the district attorney's office, waiting for the arrival of my guarantor, Flatfish. I could see through the tall window behind my bench that evening sky glowing in the sunset. Seagulls were flying by in a line which somehow suggested the curve of a woman's body. Okay, know that this book is a collection of notebooks. So the first one was small. It was like part one, like a child's kind of thing. This was part two, like this was a second notebook. And then we're going to go on to the third notebook, only part one. And this one is actually split into two parts. And then after that, there is a fourth one, I believe. No, it's just the epilogue. Anyhow, lovely, lovely. We are on page 94 of 177. And I'll tell you, I looked at 177 and it ends with a very nice word. So look forward to it.